I got 2 French bulldogs. Okay. This week I was in New York, and so I only I have a few pages left, but I think that it's so much information that rather than going through the chronological order of what's happening in 4, 5, and 6, I want to I want to just talk about the things that lit me up. Okay, so in chapter 4, but we are gonna go in order. We'll go from 4, 5, 6, and I have a ton of notes. And so I'm just going to read and talk about the ones that really interested me, that I felt really divinely connected to. So the chapter 4 is Sumerian and the Egyptian goddess. And they talk about how in Mesopotamia in 3500 BC, this was the time when not colonies, what they call it, like systems or communities started forming. And this was the problem with mythology, is that, you know what? I gotta open my door, otherwise he's gonna cry. 1 second. Come on. Okay. I have the little baby here. All right. So the time when back in 3500 BC, when communities were forming, this was a problem for myth because the communities were having like almost hierarchy. There were differentiated tasks, he called it. So there was like priests and temple workers and traders. And because of that, they weren't associating themselves with the old myths any longer. And so through this experience, this is the time when the mandala was formed, because you have a bunch of different tasks that people have to do. And the mandala was able to represent the whole and bring everyone together as the whole. And okay, let's see. And this also, okay, so this was a really, really important time because this was the emergence of temples and, but most importantly, the emergence of math, and how this was the time when they realized that the cosmos or the universe had a cosmic order to things. And I believe this is Pythagoras. Yes, this is Pythagoras who, okay, I'm going to botch all the names, but I've listened to the books and the myths, and I know it's Pythagoras, but I can't, but if I'm saying his name wrong, I apologize. So this is a time when, okay, it's Joseph Campbell. I'm just going to read his words, but that was really fascinating because I think this is probably the most important transformation of the notion of the universe in the history of human consciousness. Because the earlier plant animal oriented people were interested in exceptional phenomena, this exceptional animal that comes and brings us a message, this marvelous tree here or this pond. But now it's not the exceptional, but the coordinated and predictable that becomes the essential concern. With that, a whole new development of civilization takes place. And this was literally shifting everything. We've jumped up from just Mother Earth and her children to Mother Cosmos and the order of the universe, and mathematics is somehow the key to the nature of the Mother Goddess whose world this is. The concept of a mathematical cosmic order that encloses the whole world came to be held in the goddess image. And this is so when they were coming up with these systems in mathematics, they had a system based on decimal and sexagesimal systems, which is the unity of 60. And this is the measure that we measure all circles. And I don't know where it is in here, but this is the time when they have the observation of the heavens coupled with writing, enabled the observers to record what they saw, and led to the recognition of an orderly procession of the planets with their fixed stars, the constellations, and the visible planets. The Earth was the first and the sun, but then was the priest astronomers noticed were the moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, which are the 7 bodies, after which we named the days of the week. So this mathematical order was the movement of the planets, so a whole new concept emerged. This is the idea of a cosmic order. And it was so interesting that he goes on to say that beyond her boundary, you are beyond concepts. You are beyond all categories. You are beyond even the category of being and non-being. She is the first thing that is. And so when we're talking about the decimal of 60, he goes on to say in this book, but I knew this because it was also, there was a large portion of the mythic dimension where he talks about the number 60. And so his friend had gifted him an aerobics book because he was interested in getting in better shape. And in this book, it said that the healthy man, his heart rate, the resting heart rate is 60 beats per minute. So this is the time, or this is the little section in this goddess book, which is referencing this cosmic order being discovered, but was heavily discovered or talked about in his mythic dimension book. And he goes, okay, so 60 our resting heart rate is 60 beats per minute. Also, this is the order of the universe of the order of the circle. And he says, we dwell within the sphere of time and space, and within that is the pair of opposites. So it goes back to the circle being the circumference of everything. It's a cosmic order. There is a mathematical number that we can use to see that our beingness is a part of the cosmic order because our resting heart rate is 60. The circle is 60. The cosmic order has all the planets, the Venus, Mars, Jupiter, they're all the days of the week. This is the time when they're discovering the cosmic order of everything. And I really love when they said that time and logic limits us in our thinking. And so if our cosmic order is the circumference of 60 and we're a sphere and the earth is a sphere and this is how I'm imagining, and our intelligent field is a sphere, then there's a cosmic order like a macrocosm and a microcosm within us and outside of us. Okay, so let's moving on to like the next thing that I love so much. There's so much information in this book and I'm obsessed with it. I really, really loved also in chapter 4, they start talking about the Sumerian culture and the goddess, the high divinity was called Inanna or Ishtar. And we see her in a tremendously important role as the muse. This mask is the earliest representation of delicacy and charm of the female head and is unlike anything from this period. They also talk about the tree of eternal life, the world axis of the goddess, the early Sumerian eye goddesses. So in these figures here, so their eyes were the lapis, I think like the lapis lazuli. They were blue. And they said the name of the stone, which is interesting because I've been just starting to work with like crystals and stones. So each month I have like a new one. This one comes from Madagascar. It's like the fire opal, and I was obsessed with it. But this is talking about, so the eye goddess figures right here. This is the early Sumerian eyes from 3500 BC. It's another representation of shift in accent with regards to the goddess from the source of physical generation to that of spiritual generation. So this is the time also here, the Vorka head is a mask. This is the virgin birth, the birth of our spiritual life. So this is also the time when the goddess is becoming associated with spiritual life and the birth of spiritual life. And this is important because when we go into chapter 5, we're going to learn how the women or the goddesses are really, really factors into the male's life and how we're going to get there. It's really fascinating how in the Iliad, how they Paris had to choose between three goddesses, and the goddesses represented three pathways for his spiritual life. And whatever mistress or goddess he chose would mean that's his life force energy that he's choosing for this incarnation, this life. And I read that and was like, what? Oh my God, this is so interesting. Because then I was thinking about marriage. I go, okay, my husband chose me. There's a certain energy frequency to me that is unique to me, unique to my birth chart, to my experiences, my life, everything. And I was just wondering, okay, so did he unconsciously know that he was marrying this type of person for this part, uh, for this type of spiritual life. It blows my mind of how relevant today these messages and these metaphors are for us today. Okay. Mhm. She descends to the underworld to bring immortal life to her spouse. Another common metaphor and theme is that the goddess, a lot in these old European myths and on the vases, vases, the stelae, like all of the artwork that is imprinted on these stones, the message or the storyline is that the goddess, when the man dies, the woman goes with him. So if the man dies, he can't get to the spiritual world without the woman. So if a man dies in battle, then his wife has to die with him. So she will go into the burial grounds with him. She will be buried with him. And I believe maybe even sometimes alive. But the point is that she is the being that will carry him through to eternal immortal life. This is blows my mind. Okay, so and then okay, we're gonna move on because this is just so much information. Okay, this is really, really and then it goes into I really love page 87, 2300 BC to 1750 BC. So then and then I'm really interested in anytime they're talking about the Hammurabi of Babylon, receiving the law code from the god Shamash. This is Babylon, the Babylonian times in 1780 BC in Iraq. But these Semitic mythologies are so distinct from the natural mythologies in that they were they were war gods, and they were all about they crushed the goddess. They completely eliminated the goddess, and that is obviously in the Old Testament. We know that there's no mention of the goddess at all. So this is kind of the transition from, and this is not everywhere. As we get further along, we go into Greece. We know that Greece was one of the periods or one of the regions that was not conquered by Christians or by the Semitic mythologies, and so they were able to keep their local rituals and their local cults, which also another big difference is that their goddesses, rather than being squashed by these Indo-Europeans coming in, which they weren't, they they were instead of having like the gods taking over the goddesses, they had the gods marry the goddesses, which is why Zeus had Hera, and then we go into Iliad and the Odyssey, and there's a lot of like merging the two together. But back before we get to Greece, so we're in Iraq. This is like the arrival of the Bronze Age, the coming of the invaders were the weapons and their male-oriented mythologies. In Mesopotamia, this was signaled by the arrival of the Semitic Akkadians. Hammurabi ruled as the lord of the new city-state of Babylon. Okay, we're moving on to page 87. I love this so, so, so much because I'm really interested in with the Epstein files. There's something so ancient to it. And now it seems that my whole algorithm is filled with all these conspiracy theories. But sometimes I think, are they conspiracy theories if they are bringing us back to like the old Semitic times and the old rituals? Um, okay, let me see. So Joseph Campbell says when he said the beginning of the masculine assumption of the creator rule. So it wasn't just that the gods completely wiped out the goddesses and eliminated them, but this was the beginning of the masculine assumption of the creator rule. This is why in the Bible the male god is the one that creates everything. And he says, well, if we waited a couple of minutes, she was going to do it anyhow. So she does become the world. She gives her body willingly, but makes it look as though he were doing it. But the next interesting thing about this, and this is Joseph Campbell's words, and this is something else we learned from psychology, is that where the male come in, you have division. While where the female comes in, you have union. So this is really, really a stark contrast between male dominance and female dominance. Is that the psychology of it? Male is dominion and female is union. And I really thought that was interesting. And even he goes back to the mythologies of the buffalo and how the wife of the buffalo, she unites what appears to be the opposites, the human and the animal worlds. And with the realization that the father is different from the mother, that separation and differentiation come in. So with these masculine Semitic mythologies, we have for the first time a separation of the individual from the divine. And this is one of the most important and decisive motifs in the history of mythology, that the internal life and oneness with the universe are no longer ours. We are separated from God. God is separated from his world. Man is turned against nature. Nature is turned against man. So this isn't just about male dominance against the feminine. This is completely eliminating the idea and the metaphoric allegory of God within us, of union within us, and the union of polarities and opposites, because the feminine dominance was all about bringing together the opposition, and the male completely wiped that out. So there's another interesting thing about the Semitic mythologies. All other mythologies that I know have as their primary divinities those representing nature, the gods of the heavens and of the earth, and the powers of nature, which are within us as well as out there. And in those mythologies, the tribal ancestor is always a secondary god. Okay, this is also a very unique distinction between the old mythologies and the Greek mythologies. Well, the Greek mythologies become more stylized and story, but like the old original mythologies where the feminine was the god, he said that the tribal ancestor is always a secondary god. In the Semitic mythologies, this situation is reversed. The prime divinity in all the Semitic traditions is the local ancestral divinity. So he whom you call Zeus, we call Indra. So when these cultures were moving regions and territories, not all of them were like the Semitics where they just completely demolished the feminine. They would say, "Oh, my god Zeus is your god Indra," and they would merge them together in a beautiful harmonic way versus like my god is the god. And so we have a pattern of I can't say that. We have a pattern of exclusivity. Let's just say that. Okay. We have a pattern of social emphasis or social laws. We have an anti-nature accent. The whole history of the Old Testament is Yahweh against the nature cults. The goddess is called the abomination. So in the Old Testament, they call the goddess the abomination, when for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, she was the goddess of the whole, literally the whole. And now all of a sudden she's called the abomination. And she and her divinities are called demons, and they are not given the credit of being divine. And along with that comes the feeling that the divine life is not within us. Divinity is out there. Okay, this is so key and important. And as an ex-Mormon, this is something that that I was aware of energetically, but didn't have like the know abouts of, oh, it's in this mythology at this time frame. I had no idea. I just knew that the I couldn't leave I couldn't leave Mormonism and then go to another Christian religion, because to me it all felt the same. And this is why, because in the Old Testament, the God of the Bible is the God that rejects nature and says that God is out there and not within us. And that is like key turning point in my spiritual evolution. When divine life was no longer within us, this was like the period of, so this is 2300 BC to 1750 BC. So this was, how many years is that? Almost 600 years it took them to weed that out, to weed the idea that divinity is within us. And by 1750 BC, they were well on their way of like, okay, we're establishing this way. The attitude of prayer now is outward, whereas in the old days it was turning inward to the immanent divine. After this change, how do you get to the divine? By means of this particularly endowed social group, the tribe, the caste or the case and the church. Also, this is modern religion. This is a fear that is experienced by Orthodox beliefs that if you leave and you don't have something, like you don't have a God, then you have nothing, because their belief is God is outside here. So when you leave religion, they think you're leaving God. And they also believe, as he states, that you can't have God unless you have the tribe, unless you have the church, unless you have the temple, which is also outside you. But the metaphor of all mythologies is that we are the temples, we are the energies of nature, we are the whole. So this is the masculine emphasis against the goddess. When this occurs in individual psychology, you're overemphasizing the father role. You repudiate nature. You repudiate woman. This is what Nietzsche calls the Hamlet experience, bowing to the father and saying, Ophelia, you can go drown yourself. Um, and I really love, also one thing I love about Joseph Campbell's work is that he very often brings in psychology. And so I've been reading Carl Jung's stuff, and he is totally the godfather of modern psychology, even though he was a psychiatrist, but he paved the way for modern psychology. He was the one who coined the term shadow work, shadows, and also shadows is mentioned in this section that we're discussing today. But the really cool thing about this, how he says the psychology, is that you're repudiating the father figure. This literally is creating the shadow aspect. This is completely, and we know that we have both masculine and feminine energy within us. And if we are rejecting the father energies within us, then it's creating shadows. It's completely not diversifying, is completely omitting, but you can't omit. You're just abandoning it. When you abandon a part of your whole, that is going to manifest into physical illness. He also talks about this, which is mind blowing and fascinating. One hates one's body, one hates nature, one wants to get away from it. This is completely opposite to the attitude of the goddess cults. In the biblical tradition, which is the last great tradition of the Semitic line, there is not even a goddess in the tradition. Here's a father god with no mother goddess. A very strange thing. What happens to the mother goddess? She is reduced to the elemental level. She is the cosmic water. That's where God's spirit hovers above the water. He is given the human personification, and she is not. The chaos is exactly Tiamat, the goddess of the abyss, who now has been deprived even of her personality. This places a terrific stress on our culture. So, a lot of times, like one modern saying or thing that I've heard, like in reference to patriarchy, is that one modern excuse or reason is that the men couldn't deal or handle with the woman's emotions because the woman or the feminine, I'm not going to say woman because the feminine is not contingent on our gender. The feminine has chaos. The feminine energy is chaos because within the whole, the 60, mathematical, sexadecimal, whatever he called it, 60, the whole, the circle, this is the feminine. The feminine is the womb. And within the womb carries the polarity of all, the polarity of energies. So if we are rejecting the polarity is chaos. If we're rejecting that, chaos has been deprived of her personality. There has to be space for chaos. Then you realize also that within the Jewish tradition, the covenant is symbolized by the circumcision. You can see that woman is out altogether. And he also, I don't want to spend too much time on the Semitic invasion, but then they go into the Nile about 4000 BC, which is interesting because he talks about the Semitics coming in 1750 BC. But if we go farther back in time, which is why it's interesting that he talks about this first and then goes back in time to the Nile Valley, how the Egyptians, there was like a north, middle, south. And Egypt was well protected. And so it was really interesting to hear him talk about the key periods at like the Middle Kingdom between 2200 and 1650 BC, how the pharaohs were buried in mountainsides because the pyramids were being plundered by grave robbers. Then come the second intermediary period, and this is something very special. This is 100 years after the Hammurabi. There was an invasion into the Delta by West Asian people. And this is the period called in 1580 BC, the period called the Egyptian Empire, the Egypt that appears in all the biblical stories. The Persians conquered Egypt around 525 BC, and Alexander the Great conquered Egypt around 332 BC. Then the Romans conquered Egypt around AD 30. And that's the time of Cleopatra. And we know, I believe it was like early pages in this, that Cleopatra embodied Isis and Ishtar or no, yeah, I think Ishtar, maybe also Hathor. She embodied the energies or the personifications of these mythology goddesses. Um, so I don't want to spend more time on Smyrna because I want to move into Greece, but this also goes into the myth of Isis and Osiris, which also is the same, like the story of Jesus and the virgin birth and death and rebirth all stem from the mythology thousands of years prior to it. And that was one thing that I learned when I left Mormonism because you don't just have these epiphanies and realizations and then leave your religion. Well, you leave your religion and then you kind of feel like, okay, well, now what? But I've always been the one to follow the white rabbit. And one of the white rabbits that I followed was the idea, and it isn't an idea, it's proven. That the story of Jesus is just another incantation of the story of Isis and Osiris. And these mythological stories, as we'll see further with Artemis and Apollo and Hermes, that these gods and goddesses are reinvented against the wheel, right? Like they are the same energies that surface over and over and over. They're just given different names depending on the culture, society that they're brought into. And so with the story of Jesus, it was just something that already existed. And I learned that pretty like by the way that I learned that, I felt like I was coming from the place of I need hard-backed evidence, I need science, I everything for me is black and white. And when I heard that, it was coming from a very spiritual side, like a very astrological side of um the cosmos have as they talk about this chapter, the cosmos have a cosmic order and things reoccur like in divine timing. And by divine timing, I mean like it's predictable. As they say, there's a conceivable notion to these patterns. And that's something that really, really fascinates me and interests me with the archetypes and the personifications of gods and goddesses is I'm trying to understand the pattern of these in real time, in modern time, and especially trying to understand, well, how did Artemis appear to me when I wasn't seeking her? And what is the theory behind this cosmic order of these same mythological metaphors reappearing over and over? And why are they appearing over and over? Why do we need them? Why are they important? Why was the story of Jesus and Isis and Osiris so important in reference to our existence with death and rebirth? I think it's so fascinating. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Moving on. So, chapter 5 is Goddesses and Gods at the Greek Pantheon. Um, I just hearted this little thing that says, this is art. And of course, I am, anytime I see Artemis, I am perked right up because I'm trying to understand a bunch of the things I've been experiencing and trying to understand more about her and her energies. But the first image in this chapter is Artemis. This is a bronze sculpture of her. That's Artemis, and this was 330 to 320 BC. In theology, the god is taken as a final term, a kind of supernatural fact. When the deity is not transparent, when he doesn't open up like that to the transcendent, he doesn't open up to the mystery that is the mystery of our own lives. Also, huge. Okay, so this whole theme of the transcendent and the mystery being the transpersonal portal to our transcendence is everything. This is all what mythology is about. this is what religion is supposed to be about, but it's been taken as a final term. It's washed out over and over again. They've completely removed the goddess from the stories and removed nature from ours and removed God from us and said God is outside of us, which we now know is not the case. This also theme can expand into the spiritual realm and the metaphysical realm, and the idea that in epigenetics and physics and the laws of the universe in modern time, and that we know that this intelligent field, as neuroscience will say, and epigenetics with DNA codes, that we know that light carries information and water carries information. Telepathy exists. We can have telepathy between humans and between entities and beings and plants. And well, as the Navajo and all Indians believe, all things are alive. So, there are beliefs that things are animate and inanimate, but there are some tribes that believe everything is alive. And we know that everything is energy. So even though this table on my bookshelf are not moving, it's also energy. It's just dense energy that's not moving. And so as we move into the goddess, the themes, especially in Greece, I really love how a lot of the things that he's talking about is about transcending. And the whole point of the goddesses is the story of transcending the transcendent. And then this brings us again into okay, so my question that I'm posing is, okay, these deities are personifications of the energies of the natural world. And we can pray or set our attention on these energies of these metaphors that these mythologies represent and embody them within our lives to carry us through a whole transpersonal journey. But my question was, okay, if that's true and that's true, then how does it work when I'm not seeking the energy and it comes to me? That poses the question of this ineffable, intelligent field that we know exists through modern science now. And they talk a lot about this in the season 2 of the telepathy tapes, which is if this field is intelligent, which I believe, what is behind the force? And we know that every atom is filled with just dark matter. It's just dead. And the way that atoms and cells move is through a force of energy. And if this intelligent field is just a sterile field waiting to move, what force moved that particular Artemis energy or the personification of that myth to shoot into me in my meditation? How did that happen? How does that happen? So this is why I really love studying this, because I have so many questions, and I also feel like this has helped me get a foundation, a basis of explanation and what's going on. But I have further questions. I actually think that I can merge Joseph Campbell's work with modern science or with other things that already exist. I just need to intuitively find the books and the resources that will guide me to answering these questions that are going to link the mythical with the metaphysical. Even though he's already talking about mythical being metaphysical, I want to know more about this field and its intelligence rather than the gods arising from within us. Like if energy is polarity and can move, it's not contingent on time and space. We know that these gods and goddesses can arise from the powers and energies within us. I'm thinking like energy moving outward, but what is happening, who's behind or what's behind what is coming inward? Well, okay, our brains, our electrical fields in our heart are magnetic fields, and together they can create a force in our aura, and we can magnetize and draw in energies. And that is one explanation that I have for it, but I don't really have an entire explanation for it or how to put it into words. And I'm not here trying to convince people of my experience because I know my experience is more like I'm just sharing my rabbit hole. I'm just sharing about the things that excite me that I'm curious about. Um, okay, so I am obsessed with chapter 5. And so, hi, Danya. I'm talking about chapter 5. I'm obsessed with chapter 5 right now. And there, honestly, I'm going to show you, there's so much information. You see, like my notes, I like basically underlying every single thing in this book because I'm obsessed. But I know when there were entire pages, I actually did like, you can see here on like my page number, I just did like a bam signal around. Whoa. There's so much amazingness in this. The beginning of the chapter starts with the three great world religions are Buddhism, which is really a mythological rather than a relational religion, Christianity, and Islam. And so I thought this is really interesting. One question I had when I left Mormonism was, okay, there's a whole other level of orthodox between Christians and Jews. And I was always fascinated by that because it I have a lot of friends that have left religion and it has been so traumatizing. And yet I always energetically felt like there was a whole other level of what would be considered trauma if you were, or psychological damage if as a Jew, because, and this explains, I never understood why, but this explains it. So he says, Buddhism is related to Hinduism as Christianity and Islam are related to Judaism. Hinduism and Judaism are tribal religions. One is born a Hindu, not only born a Hindu, but born a Hindu in this, that, or another case. And one is born a Jew. This can make it difficult for modern Jews who become disillusioned with respect to the theological aspects of the religion. Since they can lose their religion and still be Jews, there's a double bind. So it wasn't like my belief of Christianity, Mormonism wasn't just that I was Mormon. My attachment was to the theological, like, exactness of the stories, and this actually happened, and this is real. But the thing with Jews is that when you're born a Jew, you're it would. But my belief wasn't like I'm born a Mormon. It was like it's like a deeper layer of psychological separateness from the universe. If that makes sense, and it really makes it difficult. These things it makes it difficult to have differing beliefs of the religion because um it's not your whole identity, but this is what's so fascinating by him stating this is like that's their conflict because they know that they're not relating to or connecting to the religion, but then their conflict psychologically is, but I'm a Jew. It's like they don't know how to separate that. And if they can go back to the beginning of time, this is just an example of like these Semitic metaphors, transference of power from female to male. Total. This is like the OG myth of control, literally. And also stating that, like I was talking about earlier, you can't, the idea that you can have God outside. You have to have this tribe to have God. You have to have this tribe to have love and goodness and joy and all those things. It's so mind boggling. So that was, I underlined a ton in there. And then also at this time, they, this is okay, I'm not gonna skip this part because this is, I think, and I'm not, and you probably, Danya, already know a lot about this, but around 3500 BC, this is what I was saying earlier in the video, a cosmic order is born. So this is during a period known as the Sumerian Uruk-B. Priests began systemic observations of the heavens. Writing was developed, and the reckoning of time and space was developed in terms of both the decimal system and the sexagesimal, based on the number 60, which is what we still use for our regular schedules and the minutes in an hour And the number, like 60 is everything. I was stating earlier that 60 is the number of resting heart. Like if a normal, healthy human, their resting heartbeat is 60 beats per minute, which also he's stating is like the cosmos are within us and without us. There's like we are part of the cosmos, is all the cosmic order. Um, and he says that the earlier primitive mythologies were interested in the exceptional, this particular tree, this interesting stone, strange little shapes, an animal that behaves in a peculiar way. In this new cosmic mythology, now the interest is only in the great orders, and so mystical mathematics begins at this time. Since the great cosmic order is the enclosing womb within which all lives exist, it is identified with the female power, the goddess, the mother universe. This universe has an innate mathematics, and the number 9 becomes the great number of the goddess. Um, okay, so 9, the number of the muses, is 3 times 3, the triads of the graces. The 3 graces are the 3 aspects of Aphrodite, and the rhythm of her energy going forth into the world, coming back, and then herself enclosing the 2 movements. 432. In this section, he just gives us in a period of 2 pages, and he'll reference it a little bit over the next consecutive pages. But in the mythic dimension, it was very textbooky and really hard for me to like. I had to like rewind it a bunch of times, but there are a whole chapters on just math, and it was like it blew my mind. So that's why I'm reading it, because I'm gonna botch it, and it's. I think that the mathematical equations of things really help me feel like I am, like, again, I am the universe, and the universe, it's all divine. So he says 432 is another interesting number. Add those numerals up and you get 9. So 4 plus 3 plus 2 equals 9. In India, the Puranas tell us that 43,200 is number of years in the Kali Yuga, the current, last, and shortest of the cycles that make up the still larger cycle, or which is called the Mahayuga, of 4,320,000 years. And then he said, this is Joseph Campbell's words. He goes, one day I was reading the Poetic Edda of Iceland, one of the great Norse sagas, and it tells us that in the warrior hall Valhalla, which if all of like the epic historical fictions on Netflix are all the Vikings are talking about Valhalla. So the warrior hall Valhalla, to which all the great war dead go. There are 580 dogs, and at the end of the cycle of time, when the world's going to end and start all over again, 800 warriors go through each of those doors to give battle to the anti-gods in the mutual destruction of the universe. And he goes, well, I noticed 800 times 450 equals 432,000. And then he says, also, in the 2nd century BC, Babylonian priest named Berosus described in Greek the Chaldean mythology of Babylon. And he pointed out that the period from when the first city, which was in that tradition the city of Kish, arose until the coming of the mythological flood, that is the model for the flood of Noah, 432,000 years had elapsed. How many years elapsed between Adam and Noah's flood? 1,656 years in these great long-lived patriarchs. So he spent about 3 frantic years trying to factor 1,656 into 43,200. And he goes, so then he had a friend worked it out. It's the dates of Genesis. Both totals of the years of reign of the antediluvian kings of Berosus and the antediluvian patriarchs of Genesis contain 72 as a factor. 72 being the number of years required in the precession of the equinoxes for an advance of 1 degree along the zodiac. 432,000 divided by 72 equals 6,000, while 1,656 divided by 72 equals 23. So that's the relationship. The relationship is of 6,000 to 23, the precession of equinoxes. And I am like, okay. Okay, this is on page 104 and 105. And so you can pick up the book. I actually think it starts before those pages, but it's interesting. And this, I feel like this could be like a good little like side quest. You can like plug in these names and like kind of maneuver like how that coincides with the story of astrology and how that happened because it's like so fascinating. And he thinks this is like, it goes, in the Jewish calendar, 1 year is reckoned to have 365 days. After 23 years, plus the 5 leap year days of that period, that amounts to 8,400 days or 1,207 days, 7-day weeks. Multiplying 1,200 by 72 to find the number of 7-day weeks in 1,656 years, which is 23 by 72, yields 1,200 by 72 equals 86,000 I don't know, 86,400, which is twice 43,200. Oh, there's a typo here. He goes, this is astounding. There it is hidden in the Bible, and there it is exposed in Brosis. Here we've got the same number popping up in Iceland, in India, and in Babylon, and in the Bible. Where's it coming from? And he just talks about, and I'm going to go to the page where I have the BAM, because it's like, this is the cosmic math. Why staying healthy is important. Mythology. Okay, this is the part that I really, really am excited to talk about. How many years does it take for a complete cycle of the equinox? How do I say that, Danya? Equinoctial zodiac. How many years does it take for a complete cycle of the equinoctial zodiac? I can't say the word. 25,920 years, which also I believe is a very, very important time in the Mayan calendar. Divide that by the sexagesimal 60 and you get 432. So this is when he said, a friend once gave me an aerobics book. In it, he noticed a man in perfect health, in perfect physical shape, at rest has a heartbeat of approximately 1 beat per second, 60 seconds. In 12 hours, it is 43,200. So this number of the rhythm of the universe is the number of the rhythm of our own heart, the microcosm and the macrocosm for one cosmic order. So when you are in health, your rhythm is in tune with that of the universe. When you get off, your rhythm gets off. The whole basis of this mythology is rhythm. And I like how he's saying this in the word rhythm because my beingness is really drawn to that word, is drawn to the word witnessing, and is drawn to the word rhythm and understanding rhythms. And I think that's also like, as a writer, I really, really, really love and identify um, seeing the patterns. But when I say patterns, some people see it through, through archetypes, through myth. I'm seeing rhythms. Like, I'm trying to understand the rhythms and things. So it has helped so, so much in my relationship, in my marriage, because I'm noticing our rhythms. And I think rhythms are the underlying basis of patterns. Yes, rhythm is, yes, it is like the invisible language. So, and I really love how he's talking about our health is contingent on this, our harmony with the rhythm of the universe, because we are the universe. The whole basis of this mythology is rhythm. The ritual year is the rhythmic year. And so you are kept in rhythm with the universe and you are pulled back in. Disease is getting off rhythm, and myth rhythm is what pulls you back. I love that. I love how he calls it myth rhythm. And I also, this is for me really validating and confirming that my desire or my projection of wanting to talk about the heroine journey or talk about myth, that's just the surface level. I think beneath that is me trying to understand the language, how to describe this energetic field, this rhythm of patterns, the patterns of rhythms that I'm feeling and understanding. And he calls it myth rhythm. And I love that because I'm like, dude, this is like the basis of everything. This is the basis of epigenetics, of neuroscience. Modern science is catching up to this. This is the basis of everything. And but that's from the secular science part. And if we can draw that in and merge the two back into mythology, I think it would really, 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 I believe like it's just another form of like the next like YouTube video or YouTube channel talking about exercises is all based and centered on mythology. I'm like, that would be so mind blowing if there was a channel that existed where they're like, we're gonna do these exercises right now, and this is Troy's version, and this is Hera's and Artemis's like exercises. That'd be so. I feel like this ancient technology. Okay, so Danya says, I always used to describe chemistry as rhythm when I was dancing. That is so beautiful. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I do. Yes. Predicting the future, but also like back to my marriage, like it's helped out. I can Exactly, because if we're fighting, we're getting in arguments and which doesn't occur often, but when it does, it's so like it's this chaos energy that we both don't we're trying to eject. We don't be in it, but if you can stay in it and feel the rhythm, you can see the projection of where that rhythm is headed, and you can also you can you can act instead of react, and it gives you more power. And he talks about this too. Like this is just power. Understanding these rhythms is power in your own life. Um, so, or wait, when you say I think you're predicting the future, are you thinking that I'm predicting the future? Because I also, maybe there's a little bit of that too. Okay, so, okay, this is also more that he goes, Um, so he talks about disease is getting off rhythm and the myth rhythm is what pulls you back. And so we have we have these mythologies of cures. And even that could be like a whole thing. You can have a whole guide called Mythologies of Cures. And like, okay, I'm experiencing heartache. I'm experiencing stomach troubles. I'm experiencing this, 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 and this. And you can use these mythologies to get you back into rhythm. These days, among the Navajo, the myth and rituals that used to be for hunters are used for curing, so as to bring people back into a core to help them become transparent to the transcendent, which is, um, all right, we can do it together. I don't want to do it alone. Okay. The great rhythmic number is 9. He's saying there are 9 uses. Add the numbers 4 plus 3 plus 2 equals 9, and that is the number of the goddess. In India, the goddess has 108 names, and in the great temples of the goddesses, the priest pours into the yoni, which is the altar, a red powder, and I believe it's the red powder they put right here on their foreheads, that women put on their forehead. Oh, that women put on their foreheads. And he counts out and recites the 100 names of the goddesses. Multiply 108 by 4, and you have 432. In Buddhist thought, there are 108 earthly desires that bind us to this sorrowful world of illusion, of Maya. 108 is the goddess number at this moment, and at that moment, at the equinox season, at the solstice season, and at dawn, and at dayrise, at noon, at midnight, and so forth. She's the one who encompasses and binds you in your life. So he says, of course, you add 1 plus 0 plus 8, and you get 9. 3 times every day in European countries, you'll hear the strain of the Angelus bell. It rings 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. The Angelus prayer addresses itself to the Annunciation, the angel of the Lord declaring to Mary that she has conceived a child by the Holy Ghost. And so it indicates the pouring of divine energy into the world. Um, Ooh, I would love for you to send me information on that. She says, doing Reiki, channeling of the energy. There are people doing Reiki today that are channeling of the energy of the goddesses right now. I think I'm headed that way. I think I'm headed that way. This is the mythology in which the Greek goddesses are the local manifestations. We have seen the deep archaeological roots of the goddess in Old Europe, where from the very earliest times of the agricultural community, she's the dominant figure as both the cosmic center and the surrounding protector. The Indo-European warrior people invaded in the 4th, 3rd, and 2nd millennia BC, bringing a collision of 2 totally contrary mythologies, one in which the matrilineal, or the mother line, is dominant and one in related primarily to the mother, and the other, the patrilineal line, in which one marks one's identity through one's father. And my note, Sarah, it says divinities change as society change. So this is kind of, then we're going into the Iliad and the Odyssey. Divinities will change as the societies change. And this is back to rhythm and energy, which is if divinities are changing, by changing, I don't think their energies and rhythm are changing. Their names are changing. That's why we have so many gods. But this what's crazy is if this number, they're saying there's 108 goddesses, but we are thousands and thousands of years beyond that. How come I think it's if there were to be more goddesses created in myth and we have new modern myths, then that would add to the one, or no, it wouldn't add. It would just be one goddess or two goddesses, and that goddess would have a different name. This is what really strikes me is these numbers are set, but myth is not. And then it goes into how the tragedy of when the Alexander the Great came in, the Romans came in, they up until this time, religion and science were not at war with each other. They were in harmony with one another. So you have the cosmic order and math and science in conjunction with myth and religion. But as soon as Alexander the Great use these Semitic principles of stating that God is outside us, they cemented those deities. They petrified them, but science continued. And so that is why, this explains why in modern time we have religion and science at war with one another, because it was never supposed to be that way. They were always supposed to be in harmony with one another, and especially because science can back up what these energies are saying to us. And I thought that that was really interesting. And I think he says it. Is this where he says it? One of the great disadvantages of a literary or scriptural tradition like the biblical one is that a deity or context of deities becomes crystallized, petrified at a certain time and place. The deity doesn't continue to grow, expand, or take into account new cultural forces and new realizations in the sciences. And the result is this make believe conflict we have in our culture between science and religion. One of the functions of mythology is to present an image of the cosmos in such a way that it becomes a carrier of this mystical realization, so that wherever you look, it's as though you are looking at an icon, a holy picture, and the walls of space and time open out into the deep dimension of mystery, which is a dimension within ourselves as well as out there. We all are, yeah, totally. Um, I really like your perspective too. And I was like reading more about your experience, your journey out of the man's world and into accepting your role and what you're doing now. And I think that you have so much to offer to us. And I just, yes, I love your voice. I love your perspective. And also it's like linking things for me. It's like, oh yeah, this and this go together and this go together. And it's so, so beautiful. I'm going to move on. Oh my gosh, I feel like I don't know if this live is going to end in 2 minutes, but I'm going to keep going. Oh, yeah. Thank you. Okay, that makes me so happy. She says that I awaken a lot of thoughts for her. That is honestly the only one of the only reason why I'm doing this, because it is so nerve wracking to be here talking, and it's so time consuming to be researching and studying. But if I didn't take that time and effort, I would have still been in Mormonism. Like, I think that we have to give a little. I think that's like you said, you're reading Braiding Sweetgrass. This is the law. This is reciprocity. I'm giving my time and energy into this ineffable field, and in return it's giving me back more remembrance and returning back to this truer source within me. Thanks for the heart and the love. Okay. Then I want to move on. There was a couple pages that I want to move on to Artemis, because this was the one that really was striking for me. And he does say that if deities are time and space conditioned, then, oh, this is something I wrote. This was a question that when I read these two pages, this is page 106 and 107. I have so many more questions in reading this. He goes, because he's talking about religion petrifying, and they're just and then a few more pages, they're personifications of energies. And so my question was, if deities are time and space conditioned, then why did Artemis come to me? And I think that question, because if mythology is the same as the old mythologies, is just the same old energy but with a new name, why did that why is it not that I'm creating my own myth and versus like this one coming to me? And he talks a lot more about how we get to choose which energies we want to work with. And this is really, really prominent in the Iliad and when in the Greece time with Troy. How let's just skip to that part because I really, really, really thought this was interesting. Give me a second to find out here because I'm going to um, probably botch it. Okay. So then this is what I really want to talk about. Like, just give me a second to find it because I was like, I loved how well, personally, so this is like for my own personal reference, I highlighted a lot or starred a lot about Artemis because this is something that's also really, really, really bizarre, not bizarre, it's interesting. So a few months ago, I input in ChatGPT. I wanted to find out what the Mayan names were for myself and my husband and my three kids. I wanted to see what our names were because I know that they have a calendar that's 260 days. And then in conjunction with another calendar, it collectively, like that's how I came up with the number in the movie that I wrote was that like these returning patterns are like every 52 years or I can't remember all the numbers, but there's a recurring pattern in numbers in the Mayan calendar, and I wanted to know what mine was. And mine in the Mayan calendar is 5 manic. And manic, MAN apostrophe IK, means deer. And Artemis, and this maybe could be answering my question or giving a little bit of explanation, just purely based on when I was born, I'm given this deer, 5 deer. And Artemis, it says here, originally Artemis herself was a deer. And she is the goddess who kills deer. The two are dual aspects of the same being. And also, is it ironic that I'm married to an identical twin? I've always been obsessed with twins, and I always thought I wanted twins, and I had one baby. I'm like, nope, nope, I'm good. And being married to a twin is not easy. It's hard. It's not hard anymore, but like there's a sense of, I think there's a reason why people incarnate into twin bodies because there's very unique life lessons learned there. But then also a huge one is what is their rhythmic dance of being, and are their souls split? Are they the same soul? And what's their rhythmic dance? And how do they give to their spouses when they're so joined and connected? And I've found witnessing his journey so amazing. It's been so beautiful and it's been hard because I'm such an individual. Yes, it is fascinating. It's so fascinating. I'm a very, very strong individual who needs her alone time and space. And then the dance between him and I has been I've shown him the beauty of having time and space to discover and be with yourself and to create. And he's always loved being attached to someone because he's so connected. Like he's never been alone. And so he's had to learn to be alone and also now and learn to like witness that when I'm asking for time and space, there's nothing wrong with our relationship. There's nothing wrong with my love for him or my devotion for him. It's just I inherently need this. And now, interestingly, he inherently needs his own time and space and asks for it. It has been like such a huge spiritual evolution journey, but witnessing it and being a part of it has been hard too. Like moving through the rhythms of those energies that are stuck in that dimension of beingness of like, this is how things are. And then, uh huh. Yes. You know, yes. hmm Yes. Yes. Ah, okay. We need to talk after this. Okay. So I just thought it was interesting that Artemis is associated with deer. There's images where she has hooves for feet, like representing or showing that she, like her transformation from deer. Um, and also her aspect of polarity. And I'm a Pisces. So, like, there was a time when in 2023, I went back to therapy because I had some things was sifting up and I was like, had this energy that was shaking my body. And I sat down and I'm at this point, I've had a really good relationship with my therapist where I can speak the language of psychology. I know I know enough where I can sit down and we can just get right to work and I can tell her where I'm at. She can help me get unstuck. Sometimes it's somatic, the practices I have to do. And then sometimes it's talk therapy where I like logically need to, sometimes I can't see unless I can like work my mind through it too. If that makes sense. And there's different ways to die. And I was on the precipice of another death. So I knew I was about to die, but my body wouldn't do it. So it was like combusting and I was like shaking so bad. So I sat in our office and I'm like, I'm like freaking out. I'm shaking. I have this, everything is true. I'm holding the energies of both light and dark. This is true and this is true. The polarity of both realities and both versions being true. And so it makes sense. Like I've always that was been one of my gifts that I've realized within the last couple of years is I can hold the polarity of things, which makes my flow easier. And my husband's like, "Well, how can you be that way?" I'm like, because both are true. It doesn't matter. Like it doesn't matter. Everything is in the whole. Both are true. And also I find it fascinating that Artemis is an aspect of duality. Um, And so then I want to go though to the part where there's so much. So Artemis is in the beginning of chapter 5. He moves into Artemis as like the first goddess, and she is the goddess of the goddess of Pole. And I thought that was interesting too, and also interesting that she's a twin. When Apollos are twin, and I found some energies in learning about Apollo that resonated with me of how I witnessed my husband. I'm like, this is so interesting. So maybe I'm reincarnated with this energetic field of Artemis energy, and he's reincarnated with this energetic field of Apollo. And yes, totally. Yeah. Okay. And so then I want to wrap this up because I've been here for a long, long time. And I just want to end with the part that I'm like feeling. I don't remember the exact words. I got to find them here because everything for me is feeling and energy. And I don't sometimes, ironically, I don't remember the words. And I don't have much notes because I was in New York and I didn't have much time this week to read and take notes. Okay. Um, Also, in when Artemis came, she's also representing like a threshold. She is the threshold. And also it says Apollo protects thresholds and entrances. This is not the part though that I want to talk about. Give me 1 second. Um, okay, gives a sense. Okay, I think this is it. We're going to close with this because this is the oh wait a minute. Is this it? I did talk about the Iliad a little bit, so I'm not going to go much into it. That's in chapter 6. And it starts off with the judgment of Paris and how I thought it really interesting that the men choosing Paris having to choose between the three goddesses is really a representation of the man choosing which spiritual path he wants to take. And depending on which woman he chooses will decide the fate of his spiritual realization. And I'm like, I saw my relationship in that because my husband married someone complete opposite as his mother. Bye. Okay, thanks for jumping on. Okay. And so my husband married someone different than his mother. And I'm like, oh, did he unconsciously know that he was choosing his spiritual path and the lessons that he learned just by me marrying him or being married to me? I say unconscious, but I don't think it was unconscious. I think he knew why he was choosing me. He was unconsciously choosing his spiritual path, whether there were words to it, the energy was there. I thought that was really, really interesting. But I'm going to end with Dionysus because this is the part where Dionysus is like a great religious sanctuary and it was the theater. And um, I'm just going to read these words. It was a field devoted primarily to Dionysus. This is in Greece for the display of mythic themes in a kind of enacted ritual. A ritual is the enactment of a myth. And by participating in the ritual, you are participating in the myth. Symbolically, the myth is the manifestation of spiritual powers, and by participating in the myth, you are activating the related spiritual powers within yourself. And that was like, again, Okay, so that's why women have priestesses and goddesses or gods on their altars. They are trying to activate the spiritual powers within themselves that are associated with that divine entity and being. And um and I find it fascinating because my journey hasn't, especially coming out of Mormonism, hasn't been, oh, I'm going to just choose to. I struggled with that. I went to this women's retreat and there's goddesses and Isis and whatnot and on these altars. And I'm like, why are we idolizing gods? It drove me crazy. So that was coming from the Orthodox viewpoint. And now I'm understanding that these gods and goddesses, they're not archetypes because I they are archetypes, but I don't view them as archetypes anymore. I view them as energies and powers. And each name or god or goddess is representing a certain particular power of nature within yourself, within this larger field. And you can access that by praying to them and I don't like saying worshiping or idolizing, but praying to them and giving to them. And in your meditations, being mindful of that, and you can access those powers. That's what he's saying. This was really crazy because this is a mythologist talking about accessing powers. And I didn't learn that in school. I didn't learn that mythology was power. I just learned that mythology is ancient, way in the past, and irrelevant. And this is the beauty and why I said in my last live, why I believe that mythologists should have a seat at the table with science and with doctors and with neurologists, like all the people that are tapping into the metaphysical, spiritual realm. I believe that mythologists need to have a seat at the table in that space because mythologies aren't ancient. They are still, their energies are still relevant and still occurring today. And so it says here the classical tradition is that you have these two deities that who are polar opposites to each other brought together. Apollo representing the rational. This is also what I thought was really interesting because my husband also, this is where I thought he represented Apollo because he represents the rational principle, which has really, really helped me because I'm all feeling, I'm all feminine, I'm all flow. So he represents the rational principle, the light principle, the consciousness principle, and Dionysus representing the dynamic of what we would call the unconscious. Dionysus, who in a Near Eastern tradition would be associated with the diabolical powers and was a non god and anti god, was recognized as co powerful with Apollo. So we have this idea of balance and interplay between the two. It was quite a period in the late 7th, 6th, and 5th centuries BC when the Apollonian tradition began to yield to the Dionysians with those terrific orgiastic rites that were the scandal of the period. But Dionysus was finally united into the tradition with his rapturous song with satires and obscenities, serving in quite a vivid contrast to the Apollonian principle. There's a book he mentions here that every time he mentions a book, I'm like, TBR, TBR, like a book I want to read. But so there's the study of Apollo and Dionysus is still Friedrich Nietzsche's The Birth of Tragedy. There he wrote that where the mind has broken through to the transcendent, it is filled with awe and terror and fascination, and it is from this breakthrough that the arts derive. The two aspects of attention, then, are to the wonder and the marvel of the world as it is and of everybody in it. And this is the entirety of my essence and why I cannot not write or I cannot not create or I cannot not share because as I was saying in my last live, I am like a bridge between the spiritual world. And I hate saying that in a way because it seems like you can't get there unless you cross my bridge and you get through me. I don't mean that. It's just I have a like a vision. I can see and connect to kind of like in a psychic way or something. I don't know. I can see this world and I can see this world and I can merge the two. And I think my art, and I'm fascinated and in awe with it, and my art would be the bridge, not me telling people you have to do this and this and this and this and this and this is how you're going to get there. It's just creating all these things that I'm seeing and letting people decide and decipher which bridge they can take to access their truest source or they can access to tap into that ineffable field that they're already connected to, but they have trouble seeing it. It's like, I hope that my art can create words and enough ineffable feeling within themselves to connect to their own divine source to where they can then start learning and figuring out what their path is and how to get there. Um, so then I really, really love, he goes, within the field of differentiation, which is in that period of time of the Sumerians, within the field of time, we have these forms that are manifestations of the transcendent power. And the artist in rendering the form is giving us a sense of the imminence of the transcendent in this body. The body becomes dreamlike in its wonder. This is called the Apollonian aspect. And I have a name now for what I've been experiencing since 2020. 2020, I feel like I jumped into a magic bubble, as I would call it. I had no other coined term to put it, where all of my suffering from leading the Mormon religion stopped. And by the way through a character that I had written in a book and I didn't understand him, but this book is unpublished. But this, I've often referenced this book. It's called Gligrim. This is the book that spun and started my spiritual journey because there was a character in it that I didn't understand. And this, ironic but not ironic, this book is about genies. And he's the most powerful genie. And I wondered, how is he so zen and calm and chill when he has every reason to be upset and angry? And what is his character? What makes him tick? Why is he this way? And I was able to have my first death where I experienced that, and every death that I have is a theme. And this theme was suffering. Or not suffering, surrendering. And the surrendering ended my suffering. I was suffering because I was still living in black and white. I was still living in this orthodox view of black and white. And I needed to surrender to the idea that my world can exist just as much as their world can exist. And I entered this magic bubble, which, of course, not all problems ceased, but I was able to have flow and able to tune into this ineffable field where I believe I started channeling. And he's calling it here the Apollonian aspect. This is when the body becomes dreamlike in its wonder, and that's the magic bubble. And so, on the other hand, we can be interested in the terrific energy that shatters everything and brings forth new things. That is to say, the projecting aspect rather than the inform aspect, and that is Dionysian. So I have OMFG next to this. I think we're in here because I like literally died with this. The Apollonian represents the fascination with that which is in the poignant, passing moment, while the Dionysian represents identification with the energy that is shattering and bringing forth new forms. These two must function together in art. Pisces, polar energy, earnestness. Apollonian represents the fascination with the ineffable magic field. And then Dionysian represents the identification with the energy, like the dragon like energy, the destruction, the burning, which is also why I can literally, I come from my beingness as Mormon and coming from a Mexican family where the women are filled with fire and like a force to reckon with. And also there may be a little mental illness in my family that comes and just burn. You're going to say what you're going to say. There's no filter. Don't care who you hurt, but you're just going to burn everything to the ground. I come from that. So I, in my beingness, have both energies of like the Apollonian and the Dionysian. And I found this so interesting. And I wrote OMFG because it was like another really interesting, cool, unique way to witness myself in this incarnation. So Nietzsche sees sculpture as the principal art representing form, and he sees music as the principal art representing the dynamic through time and process. So we have to have both in a work of art. If the dynamic is not found, if the dynamic is not formed, all you have is the scream and the cry. And if the form does not take into account the dynamic, you have simply a petrifact, a piece of dead, dry sculpture. When you combine the two, you break through to this mystery. The mysterium tremendum a fascinans. He says this a lot in the mythic dimension. It's called the mysterium tremendum a fascinans. The experience of the sublime when you break through is of the tremendum. This is why religion is called the fear of God. The other name for it is the love of God. You haven't caught the sense of the mystery, how shattering it is to your whole system and your ideas and everything else, unless you get both senses. I'm going to end there because that is, speaking of the 60 and full circle, that, again, I already energetically felt this truth. I feel I experience truth and energies and narratives before I even have words for them. So this, or even like I would consider myth a system of science. So this explains, it brings back full circle my incarnation of feeling like coming from this fiery dragon Latina energy and just purging and letting everything fire and destruction, which is good and not good. It was not great for my marriage when I just had the ability to sit with and identify or even accept or receive his feelings and his emotions. But destruction needs to happen as it's happening now. And then the Apollonian aspect of like, this is where I did what I didn't have, because even though it was Orthodox religion, I never, ever, ever in my life had ever tapped into the ineffable idea or the wholeness of this ineffable field that exists that we can tap into. I never even once tapped into it through religion. There were moments in my life that I can look back and say, it pokes through there, and it poked through there, and it poked through there, but had nothing to do with religion, had all to do with my energy and my essence. But that was it. That was a full circle moment for me of like, okay, just because, and I also believe that just because someone is an Orthodox something doesn't mean that this ineffable magic field is not communicating. It is communicating. It's just construed differently through words or narratives. But it's much, much harder to have a fuller sense of it when it has to fit into this form of God is out here. And we're going to end with that. This was an absolutely amazing 3 chapters. I loved every single minute of it. I was reading last night and I had to stop. I think I posted my notes like, oh my God, oh my God. Like my heart was racing. There were many pages where I just had to stop and I just sat there and just stared at the wall like in silence because I couldn't believe what I just read. It was just like put into words feelings and things. And these feelings feel really ancient. And it's like, okay, there have been men and women who have been studying this for a very long time and I'm on the right path. So I'm just figuring out how to make sense of it all. So we're going to end there. Thank you for joining my live, and we will see you next week for chapters 7. And I think I only put 7, but I think whatever random chapters, 7 and 8, or only 7, however many there. But okay. Thanks. Bye.